In a world where nature no longer merely surrounds us, but watches us, something ancient awakens among the trees. When science tries to explain the unexplainable, the boundaries between reason and madness fade away. What if the forest had consciousness? What if we were not alone out there? So today we will see the movie called In the Earth. Before the main story begins, the film opens with a silent yet unsettling sequence. A figure is seen breaking stones into smaller pieces and then burying them in different areas of the forest floor. We never see their face, and no dialogue is spoken. The act feels ritualistic, as if the person were planting something rather than simply hiding it. The story is set in the near future, in a world ravaged by a deadly pandemic. Society has collapsed into scattered zones, and strict quarantine protocols have been implemented to prevent the spread of the disease. Cities are no longer safe, and remote wilderness areas have become territories monitored by the government. We are introduced to Martin Lowry, a scientist who arrives at a quarantine outpost on the edge of a dense forest near Bristol, England. His mission seems straightforward: to assist in an agricultural research project aimed at resolving the global food crisis caused by the pandemic. However, Martin has a personal motive. He wants to find Dr. Olivia Wendell, a fellow scientist who vanished in these woods months ago. Martin and Olivia shared a personal connection before she disappeared, although this detail is unknown to the authorities at the quarantine post. Martin undergoes a strict medical examination. He is disinfected, tested for the virus, and questioned by those stationed there. These workers have been isolated for a long time and follow only government orders, with little contact with the outside world. They are cautious, clinical, and uninterested in Martin's true research goals. Even so, he is cleared to enter the forest. Since vehicles are not allowed in the area, Martin must travel on foot. He is assigned a park ranger, Alma, who will guide him during the 2-day hike to Olivia's last known research site, deep within the forest. Before departing, Martin notices a disturbing ancient painting on the cabin wall. It depicts strange rituals, people worshipping a figure called Parneg Feg, the supposed spirit of the forest. Alma tells him it is just an old local legend used to scare children. People once believed the forest had a soul, and that Parneg Feg was its presence. Martin and Alma dismiss the myth, but the painting leaves a lasting impression. Concerned about the missing scientists, Olivia included, Martin asks the outpost staff why they weren't tracked with GPS or communication equipment. The staff explain that the forest has no reliable signal, and that previous researchers entered without a guide, increasing the chances of getting lost. They hint that the forest can be disorienting and unnaturally silent, affecting people psychologically. The next day, as they begin their trek into the forest, Alma mentions that Dr. Olivia Wendell occasionally sent letters when she first began her work there, but nothing has been heard from her in the last 6 months. Martin remains silent about his personal connection to her. Officially, he is there to assist with agricultural research. The mission's goal is to study the forest's unusually fertile soil, which scientists believe could be key to solving future food crises. As night falls, they set up camp. Martin, unaccustomed to wilderness life, struggles to sleep due to the strange echoes of animals and birds coming from deep within the woods. The following morning, they continue their journey and come across a burned-out tent. Alma quietly recalls that a family once camped there and never returned. She suspects the tent belonged to them. It is a grim reminder that not everyone who enters this forest comes out. By nightfall, they camp again, but this time something goes terribly wrong. Flashing lights burst around them, disorienting and blinding them. They are attacked by an unseen assailant. Martin and Alma are beaten unconscious and their supplies are stolen. When they regain consciousness the next morning, they find their camp destroyed. Food, shoes, and equipment all gone. Their lives had been spared, but it is now clear this was not the work of animals. A dangerous human is watching them. Without gear and with Martin injured, they are forced to keep moving. But the deeper they go, the stranger and quieter the forest becomes. There are no birds, no wind. only stillness. Then, suddenly, they encounter a man. He introduces himself as Zach, a hermit who claims to have seen them before and wants to help. Though wary, Martin and Alma, desperate and vulnerable, have no choice but to accept his offer. Zach appears calm, soft-spoken, and oddly philosophical. He claims to have lived in the forest for a long time, far from the chaos of the world and, to some extent, from reality itself. At his camp, Alma and Martin notice that Zach is well-equipped. He seems to have been living there for quite some time. Despite his isolation, he appears strangely content with his solitude. Zach notices Martin's leg wound, which is deep. He quickly gathers materials and treats the injury with skilled hands. He then gives them new clothes, food, water, and finally a strange drink, a kind of sweet syrup. But something was wrong. Moments later, Alma and Martin realized the drink was mixed with a sedative. Zach had drugged them. The man who seemed helpful was only pretending. When they lose consciousness, Zach removes their clothes, dresses them in strange garments he made himself, and takes disturbing photographs. The images give the impression they are dead, as part of some dark ritual. When they awaken, they find themselves tied to chairs. Panic sets in. They beg Zach to let them go, but he simply smiles, cold and distant. "It's not that simple," he says. "Do you think you can just leave? That's not possible." He shows them the photographs he took, and both are horrified. The next day, Zach keeps them tied up outside under the sun, speaking cryptically about an invisible power that lives in the forest. He claims he can communicate with it. "Your arrival here was no accident," he insists. "The outside world is already dying." And with that chilling prophecy, the nightmare only grew worse. Alma and Martin were still trying to understand what was happening when the horror escalated. That night, Zach approached Martin with disturbing news. The wound on his leg had become badly infected. "I'll have to cut off a few of your toes," he said coldly, holding a crude axe. Martin and Alma pleaded with him to stop, terrified at the idea, but Zach was beyond reason. Without hesitation, he raised the axe and severed 2 of Martin's toes. Martin screamed in pain before losing consciousness. Earlier, when they had been tied to the chairs, Martin had noticed a small blade nearby. Whispering to Alma, he told her about it, hoping they could use it to cut their restraints. But before they could act, Zach returned. Hours later, Zach dragged Martin outside. This time, he wasn't playing at being a doctor. He was preparing for a ritual sacrifice. Dressing Martin in strange robes, he placed symbolic objects around him as though preparing an offering. Meanwhile, inside the tent, Alma managed to reach the blade and free herself. She quickly untied Martin as well. When Zach, suspecting something was wrong, came back to check, Alma struck him with all the strength she had left, injuring him. Seizing the moment, Alma ran to Martin and helped him to his feet. They had already discussed a plan, split up and run in opposite directions. It was their only chance. Despite his injuries, Martin fled into the forest. Zach, bleeding but still driven by madness, went after Alma. But just as he was about to shoot her with a bow, Martin shouted from a distance, drawing his attention away and giving Alma a chance to escape. Now hunted like prey, Martin tried to stay hidden in the dense forest, while Zach stalked him with an axe in hand. But in the distance, Martin saw lights and a microphone. Desperate, he shouted for help into it. Then something unexpected happened. A figure appeared, a woman in a survival suit. She dragged Martin to safety and, in a shocking twist, revealed herself to be Olivia, the very scientist Martin had been searching for all along. She took Martin to her camp and treated his wounds, but even then, Martin couldn't stop worrying about Alma. Driven by that fear, he went out to look for her and, against all odds, found her. Olivia carefully treated her injuries, but when Martin described what Zach had done, a shadow of pain crossed her face. She was horrified. The man who had once meant everything to her had become something monstrous. Martin mentioned that during his time in the forest, He had seen several bodies. "He's a killer," he said darkly. Then he asked the question that had been haunting him for some time. "Why didn't you make contact? Why didn't you reach out to anyone?" Olivia sighed, as if the weight of months suddenly fell upon her. She admitted she had been completely consumed by something extraordinary, something that could change everything. She had spent months researching it, recording it. There hadn't been time to send even a single message. Seeing Martin's infected wound, she frowned. They needed to cauterize it. Martin braced himself once again, enduring unbearable pain as part of his fight to survive. Later, a revelation shook him. Zach was Olivia's husband. She explained that he had once been part of her team. They had arrived together, full of purpose and curiosity, but everything changed after discovering a strange black stone buried deep in the forest. "It wasn't just a rock," Olivia said. "It was something else." She had set up sensors and microphones throughout the area and discovered patterns, signals, perhaps even a language coming from the trees themselves. She believed the forest was alive in a way they couldn't yet understand. Not metaphorically, but literally. The trees were communicating. She had been recording the sounds for months. They followed a pattern. She had built a language model to decode them. She didn't know exactly what this force was, but she was convinced it wanted to speak to them. As a scientist, Martin could sense it too. The patterns in the recordings, the unnatural frequencies. It wasn't random noise. It was deliberate, purposeful. Zach and Olivia had both become obsessed with the mystery, but their paths diverged drastically. At first, they worked together, Olivia explained, but upon discovering the ancient stone, everything changed. They found strange carvings nearby and even a worn ancient book. Upon translating it, they realized this was no longer just science. It was something beyond it. Zach, seduced by the arcane and the unexplainable, abandoned her. He chose belief over research, ritual over analysis, worship over reason. He surrendered himself to that force and now believed that sacrifices pleased it. That was why he had tried to kill Martin. He was offering him as tribute. Martin was stunned. Olivia, however, continued with science and observation. She believed she was close to understanding what that force was trying to tell them. Perhaps now she could uncover the truth. She looked toward the forest, her eyes filled with a mixture of awe and fear. This place, she whispered, was all connected. The trees, the plants, the sounds. It was like a vast living network. After hearing Olivia's explanation, Alma pulled Martin aside. She was deeply unsettled. She whispered that something wasn't right. Olivia spoke just like Zach. Strange ideas, mysterious voices. She wondered if they might both be in league. She insisted they had to get out of there and take Olivia with them in case she tried anything. Though hesitant, Martin agreed. He decided to maintain the appearance of trust while planning their escape. But then Olivia said something that froze him. She asked if he truly believed he had come there of his own will or if he felt something had drawn him in, like an implanted thought. She looked at him intently and asked if, before arriving, he had felt a ringing in his ears. Martin, surprised, admitted he had. Olivia nodded, as if confirming a long-held suspicion. It had happened to her and to Zach as well. That ringing, that call, was not natural. That force in the forest was luring people in. But why? They still didn't know. Despite her warnings, Martin chose not to believe her. He and Alma decided they could wait no longer. They had to escape. But as they prepared to flee, the forest reacted. A thick, pale mist began to rise from the ground, seeping into the camp like a silent poison. It wasn't simple fog. It was a gas. Breathing it was dangerous. Olivia warned them to wait, but Martin and Alma insisted. They asked her for one of her protective suits. Olivia reluctantly agreed. Alma would go first. To keep her secured, Martin tied a rope around her waist, in case she lost consciousness. She had barely advanced a few meters into the mist when it began to affect her. Dazed, her eyes wide in horror, she began to hallucinate. Martin pulled on the rope and quickly brought her back. She trembled, shaken, and muttered over and over, "I saw it. It was huge. It was watching me." That night, when they thought nothing could get worse, Zach returned. He stood at the edge of the camp holding a flare, his face illuminated by its glow. Alma and Martin froze, terrified. Had he come to kill them? Olivia went out to speak with him. When she returned, her expression was unreadable. She said Zach claimed he could communicate directly with the force of the forest and believed Martin was the key. According to him, the entity wanted to speak, and could only do so through Martin. She handed him a dark, thick liquid contained in a carved vessel. She told him he had to drink it. Martin and Alma exchanged glances. The truth was clear. Zach and Olivia were aligned. The lines between reason and madness had blurred. But Martin had no choice. He couldn't risk Alma's life again. She had already saved him once, so he gave in. Together they sat beneath one of the giant trees. Martin took the cup and drank. Olivia believed Martin hadn't simply been drawn to the forest, but summoned. She was convinced the entity wanted to speak through him. But before anything else could happen, a sharp, piercing sound rang through the air. Martin and Olivia fell to their knees, clutching their heads in pain. Alma, trying to reach Olivia for help, stumbled into the scientist's private workspace. What she found there froze her in horror. Photographs. Dozens of them. All of the people Zach had killed. Olivia had documented everything, almost obsessively. This was no longer research, it was worship. Alma understood the truth. Olivia wasn't just like Zach. She could be worse. Driven by fear and anger, Alma confronted her. A violent struggle broke out in which Alma managed to wound Olivia before fleeing into the forest. Meanwhile, Zach approached Martin, axe in hand, ready to finish what he had started. But Alma arrived just in time. First, she blinded him by stabbing something into his eye. Then, without hesitation, she finished him off for good. The victory, however, came at a price. The toxic mist began to spread through the forest. The strange gas was moving faster than before. Alma was caught in it, suffocating. Her mind began to unravel. She started to see impossible visions, surreal, terrifying, otherworldly. Time lost all meaning. And when morning finally came, she was no longer the same. Alma awoke with an empty gaze and an unnatural calm. In front of her was Olivia, weak, trembling, but smiling. "Thank you," she whispered, and with her last breath, collapsed. It was as if a shadow had been lifted from her body. The entity was gone, and now it had found a new vessel. Alma turned to Martin. Her voice was soft but hollow, her eyes distant yet fixed. "Let's go," she said. "Let me get you out of the forest." But something in her tone had changed, something deeply and irreversibly wrong. And that is how the story ends, not with an escape, but with an unsettling revelation. The forest doesn't let you leave unscathed. I hope you enjoyed the video.